Welcome to Pharmacy in Focus, where I will be having pocket-sized conversations on current topics and interests relating to pharmacy and the wider health sector. My name is Sharina Basan, bringing you Pharmacy in Focus on behalf of the Pharmaceutical Society of New Zealand. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Pharmacy in Focus. In this episode, we will talk about parenting challenges when returning to the workforce. Today, I am joined by Susie Farquar. Susie is a community pharmacist. She is married with two boys who are now 15 and 18 years old. Her husband was a stay-at-home dad, which was quite unusual at the time. She has owned Unichem Green Meadows Pharmacy for 12 years, a pharmacy that provides many clinical services. She is also the pharmacy representative on the Hawke's Bay Immunisation Steering Group. Despite the stress of COVID over the last few years, she continues to enjoy being a pharmacist and wants to see more women stay in the profession. Today we'll be discussing Susie's experience of being a new mum and returning to work full-time, the challenges she faced and how she managed these. Welcome and thank you for being with us today, Susie.
Hi.
And when we talked previously, you mentioned that the environment you worked in when you were pregnant with your first child was not ideal, and that led you to move to another role. Can you expand on what led you to moving jobs at that particular time?
It was one of my first management roles, so it was, quite a step up for me professionally. So it was quite a stressful job. And then there were some changes kind of in the overall management structure and the owner that were a bit challenging, and I didn't feel very supportive. There were comments while I was pregnant of, making sure that I didn't take any time off for midwife appointments or scan appointments. And there was no sort of openness to cutting back hours and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty stressful and full on right until I went on maternity leave. Yeah, so I didn't feel that going back to that environment was going to be supportive. So yes, made the decision to start back somewhere else.
And you mentioned starting back somewhere else. I recall you saying you went back to work after 3 months and 4 months after having both of your boys, which is pretty quick. They were both very, very young. How was it starting a new job after 12, 16 weeks after having a child?
It was an added layer of complexity to starting a new role. I mean, there's always, when you start somewhere new, you kind of got to get a feel for what the staff is like and what the atmosphere of the pharmacy is like. So it kind of added another layer that I was going in with a whole lot of people I didn't know, and needing a little bit of extra on top of normal staff requirements. I was still breastfeeding Josh when I went back to work, so there were extra challenges in terms of needing to be able to express during the day and stuff like that. Yeah, but I think it was such a relief from where I'd been that it was worth it. It was also closer to home, which was good, so it reduced a bit of travel time.
Wonderful. And you mentioned that you're breastfeeding. So you're breastfeeding, you're working full time, you needed to express at work, and you had this new job. How did you and your workplace manage those needs?
Well, I was too shy to say anything about it. I was working for an older male pharmacist. He was sort of coming up to retirement age. So I used to go and sit in my car at lunchtime and put the sunshade up to kind of block the windscreen, and would express in the car because I was too embarrassed to say that I needed a private space in the pharmacy. There was only a staff room, which would have meant that anyone could have walked in and out while I was on my lunch break. yeah, and I didn't really know how to approach that, so I would just go and hide in the car. And I
Oh,
had
wow.
a cooler bag with ice packs in it, and
Oh,
yeah, would kind of hope that nobody walked down the side street where my car was parked.
oh dear. And looking back now, would you feel more comfortable, or hope other women would feel more comfortable approaching their managers about needing to express?
I would hope so, and I think some of that comes with being a bit older and wiser as well now. That it wasn't that they wouldn't have let me, and so sometimes you do just need to speak up for yourself. And now, as an owner, if I knew that one of my staff was coming back to work and they were still expressing, then I would take the first step and say, what do you need? I will find a space for you, and we'll put a sign up, and we'll let all the other staff know that you need privacy, or whatever. That yeah, I would make it a lot more comfortable. I think sometimes people say, just let us know what you need, and you don't know what you need, so you can't ask for it.
Definitely. And you mentioned your husband was a stay-at-home dad and how unusual that was at the time. How did you come to that decision? How did he find being at home? I do know that was 18 years ago now. So, how did other people take that change in, I guess, traditional roles, if you want to put it that way?
I guess I have always loved being a pharmacist, and knew sort of fairly early on that I wanted to get into management and then ownership. And Richard was in a sales rep role for a plumbing company, and it was a job. He wasn't passionate about a career, and so we'd we met when we were both quite young, and we'd always joked about it. He was like, oh yeah, I'm marrying Susie for earning potential. And when we have kids, I'm going to stay at home. But then when the time actually came, you were kind of like, well, I earned more than him. And I wanted to stay working, and he was happy to not work. So it kind of just made sense for him to stay at home. It was very unusual. We didn't know anybody else that had been in that situation back then. And it was definitely, we were just figuring our way as we went along. I mean, even my mum was, saying to my sisters, oh, Susie thinks she's going to go back to work, but she's probably going to find out she doesn't want to. And so we'll just have to be really supportive of her when that happens. Yeah, so it was a big learning curve for both of us. But I think that women need to acknowledge that men are a lot more capable than they're given credit for a lot of the time. And we were both starting from zero. We hadn't had children before. We hadn't been around heaps of babies. Josh was the first grandchild on both sides of the family. So we both knew nothing. So
in many ways, you were in the same position.
Yeah. It wasn't like I had a magic parenting book that he didn't have. So yeah, we both had to learn as we went. So yeah.
Wonderful. Great. And many parents worry about whether their children will take a bottle, because obviously that often needs to happen before parents can go back into work. Was that an issue for you, or was that relatively seamless?
No, the boys were fine at taking a bottle. I'd been stockpiling breast milk in the freezer for quite some time, because I knew I was going back to work, and I kind of was like, if I can get them past 3 months, that's a good tick, and then anything extra on top of that was an added benefit. So we would just start giving them breast milk through the bottle fairly early on, probably a month before I went back to work. So they were actually still very little, and probably helped the transition that they didn't really know any different. So yeah, they were both fine. I know for some people it can be a real challenge. I knew they had to be able to take a bottle, and I knew they had to sleep through the night by the time I went back to work. So I was just really strict on kind of those things had to work. So we just made them work.
Indeed. And what about sleep deprivation? I mean, we know babies, they need feeding, they need, cuddling and comfort overnight. Was this an issue for you when you knew you had to also work the following morning?
Well, like I said, I knew I had to get them to sleep, like a decent chunk of the night before I went back to work, because I wouldn't be able to function if I was getting up every 3 hours. And so we had quite a structured routine to the day for feeding times, play times, sleep times, and then nighttime bedtimes. So both the boys were kind of sleeping through the night by about 10 weeks, from like 10 till 6.
Wow.
Because I just had to make that happen. So once they'd gone to bed, I would kind of sneak in and sit in the dark and feed them again just before I went to bed. And then when they did wake up in the night, it was the same thing. Like I would go in the dark, no lights, nothing, and just feed them, burp them straight back to bed. There was no talking, no playing. I wouldn't change their nappy unless I really had to, just to get them really used to, when it's dark, you sleep. Which is actually my preceptor from when I was an intern. That was kind of her one tip to me as a new mother. She was like, all fun and games during the day, but come nighttime, like it's serious and you just get the job done, sit in the dark, get them to sleep. And that works really well for us.
Great. So having that structure.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting how things have changed in the time period. So 18 years ago, when I had Josh, when we came home from the hospital, he went straight into his own bedroom in a bassinet, and that was normal. That's what you were encouraged to do. So we didn't actually have the babies sleeping in our bedroom with us, which now, like, kind of, it's not really heard of.
Quite different. That's right.
Yeah. So that's just the way it was then. So whether that helped because you didn't hear every single snuffle, they had to have a good cry before you could actually hear them.
That's it.
But, I mean, definitely you go back to work and you're a bit tired, but I think once you're a parent, you never sleep as good. And so now that I've got teenagers, I don't sleep. So I'm like, I'm home yet.
Different types of worries, right?
Yeah. Like, has that party finished? Did they drive safely?
Yep, the parental worries never end.
Yeah.
And Susie, there's a lot that you would have learned both being a parent and through being a pharmacist and a manager and an employer. We know parenting can provide valuable skills in the workplace. What skills have you learnt as a parent that has helped you in the workplace?
I think that gives you a lot of empathy for other parents when they come in with sick children. I mean, when your kids are sick, it's really stressful. And you kind of do, like, is this nothing or is this terrible? And, like at 10 o'clock at night when you're trying to decide, do I need to go to after hours or should I just give them some paracetamol? Like when you don't have children or it's not your own children, you can be a lot more clinical about your decisions. But when you're emotionally involved, it's really hard to make sensible decisions. And even some of the GPs that I work with say the same things. Like when it's their own children, they don't know what to do, even though they might have worked in a pediatric hospital. So having a bit of empathy for parents when they come in and they might be humming and hawing and should I start the antibiotics? Should I just see how they go? And you kind of can have a bit more empathy and you learn some practical solutions for things. So, when it is hard to give flucloxacillin because it really does taste disgusting, that you can say to parents, it really does taste disgusting. So if your kids say it's horrible, they're not being naughty, like it is horrible. And So you kind of find tricks of how to get medicines into kids, and you just be a bit more empathetic to how hard it can be.
Definitely. And from your experience, what advice would you give parents around balancing work and family when going back to work after having children?
I think it's important to have like a good structure set up. So a good structure about, like what happens at home, and putting in the effort to find a good childcare arrangement, whatever that is that you feel comfortable with. So whether that's in home or a good daycare facility or a grandparent or a stay-at-home parent, having something that you feel comfortable with and you feel good with, so that then when you go to work, you're not worrying about that you know that your child is in a happy, safe place. Takes a big worry off your mind. I think, Richard and I have always been quite upfront about the parenting workload as well. So, having in place, what are we doing for dinner and who's cooking it? So that you're not leaving things ambiguous, and, that everybody just knows where they stand makes a big difference as well. We've done a few things over the years. I mean, we've had My Food Bag or Bargain Box or HelloFresh or whichever one seems to be going, because for me, that's just one less decision to make. Yeah. When you're making decisions all day long, you don't want to have to make decisions about what's for tea. So that's worked really well for us. And I'm a big believer in a 4-day working week. Even as an employer, I think it works really well to have a life admin day. So a day during the week when you can go and do all the other stuff that needs to be done, whether it's going to the hairdresser or attending a school outing or organising a birthday party or doing the washing or something like that, that if you can have one day to get all that stuff done, then it makes your time at work a lot more focused. You're not trying to squeeze things in at lunchtime or do stuff on the way home from work with the kids when everybody's tired. So I think that's really valuable. And from an employer point of view, I would rather have somebody 4 days a week than no days a week. If that made the difference of getting somebody back to work rather than working 5 days, then I think that's something that lots of people should consider.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. So you've said a little bit about what parents can do and ways of providing structure in their home life to help with that work-life balance across the board, and also from an employer's perspective, the support that they can provide around working hours, saying that you'd rather have someone that is good and retain that staff member than to lose them altogether. Any other suggestions for employers?
So most of my staff have school-aged kids. So I know that come school holidays, they're all going to want time off. So we're just quite upfront about that and plan well in advance. And you kind of say, like, the next school holidays are in 6 weeks' time. What's everybody's plans? They take it in turns. So it's not the same person getting in early and booking annual leave for all the school holidays. But, we're just quite upfront that you had time off last holiday, so it's somebody else's turn this holiday. So normally one staff member per week will have time off in the school holidays. Again, none of them work full-time 5 days a week, so that they do all have a bit of time to go to activities and things like that. And especially with the ones when they're in daycare, like the daycares are just awful in terms of sending kids home for any little sniffle. Like they sneeze and it's like, oh my God, they've got a cold, they have to go home. And it's not the staff's fault. And I know when those phone calls have come through, you can just tell from the girls' tone that it's daycare. And we've even had times where they've brought their kids into the doctors, and the doctors have given them a medical certificate to say that they're fine to go back to daycare, and the daycare won't take them.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think that their guidelines are based on any medical data. So just being empathetic that it's not the staff member's fault. And it's frustrating, but that's just how it is. And so not taking it out on the staff.
Everyone's doing the best they can, and the daycares are still following their policies. So no one's in the wrong. It's just not working out that day.
But I think like encouraging the staff to make plans in advance and having good arrangements themselves is important. There's been times where, like, if it's a teacher only day, and like quite a few of them, their kids all go to the same school, that you kind of make the suggestions like, well, like, how about we get one person to look after everybody's kids rather than 3 staff members have the day off. If you can do some more practical suggestions, and it's much better to pay a babysitter to look after 3 kids than to have 3 staff members off work.
Definitely. So brainstorming.
Just trying to be a little bit creative, and I guess being open, like just being open with everyone so everybody knows where they stand. Like each one of my staff, they all do what I call a late finish, but it's only 5 o'clock, so it's not late. But rather than one person having the perfect school hours, they all have one day where they have to stay later, because it just makes it fair across everybody.
Wonderful. Well, hey, thank you so much, Susie, for being with me on Pharmacy in Focus today and sharing your experiences as a parent returning to the workforce, and also your experiences as an employer supporting a lot of your staff that have young children as well. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.